Erythropoiesis refers to the process of producing red blood cells. We know that this process starts in red bone marrow. Inside red bone marrow, we have stem cells that they're capable of forming a variety of cells. Please keep in mind, inside red bone marrow, we end up with production of also white blood cells and platelets. When we're looking for red bone marrow, we have to go inside spongy bone, and we know that we find spongy bone at the center of flat bones and also at the end of long bones. For example, in epiphysis and metaphysis of long bones, we can find a good amount of spongy bone. In this video, I focus on production of red blood cell. This is a cell that has many different functions. One of the very important things that red blood cell does would be transporting oxygen and carbon dioxide. So this is the cell that transports oxygen to the tissue cells and collect their carbon dioxide and send the carbon dioxide to those organs that can excrete this gas out of the body. Inside each red blood cell, we can find about 280 million molecules of hemoglobin, and we see that a very high percentage of oxygen will be transported by hemoglobin molecules that we have inside red blood cells. That would be 98.5% oxygen. 1.5% of oxygen would be transported in blood plasma as dissolved gas. When we follow the transportation of carbon dioxide in blood, we see that 23% of carbon dioxide attaches to proteins such as hemoglobin molecules that we have inside the red blood cell. 77% of carbon dioxide travels in plasma. The only difference is that 7% is dissolved gas in plasma and 70% travels in plasma but in the form of bicarbonate ion, which is a very important buffer that we find in blood plasma. Transporting oxygen and carbon dioxide is not the only thing that we expect from red blood cells and the hemoglobin molecules that they carry. Hemoglobin is considered an iron-binding protein, and we need iron-binding proteins to slow down some infections, including bacterial infections. So we can say that red blood cell is also involved in immunity. Also, we know in some places, for example, throughout the process of internal respiration, hemoglobin inside the red blood cell can switch its role and start acting as a buffer to maintain the balance of pH inside the red blood cell. So we're trying to emphasize that the function of red blood cell is not limited to only one function. Now I go back inside the red bone marrow because we're following the production of red blood cells. We see that the stem cells rapidly divide. They go through proliferation and eventually we end up with a cell that is called proerythroblast. Recall, blast refers to a young active cell. Proerythroblast is a cell that is going to proliferate and form more number of cells, and eventually we get those cells that they start synthesizing and storing hemoglobin molecules. And realistically, because the goal is to end up with red blood cell that carries millions of hemoglobin, throughout the process the cells that are produced should start losing their organelles to make room to store more hemoglobin molecules. As soon as the nucleus from the cell is ejected out, the two sides of the cell collapses, so we end up with the biconcavity that we see in the cell, and the cell that has hemoglobin inside does not have nucleus and it's not red blood cell yet, is called reticulocyte. So think about it as an immature cell that is not ready to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide yet. In red bone marrow we have sinusoidal blood capillaries. We know they are very permeable. They allow even cells to pass through their walls, so reticulocyte easily gets inside the bloodstream, and it takes usually 1 to 2 days for reticulocyte to lose the rest of its organelles and become mature red blood cell, an erythrocyte. And at this point, red blood cell will be ready to start taking care of its duties, including transporting oxygen and carbon dioxide. Here it's important to note that when we analyze a blood sample in blood, we should find both reticulocyte and erythrocyte. In general, reticulocyte count is used to measure the rate of erythropoiesis. Sometimes we have to test if really the rate of erythropoiesis is at an acceptable range. In a healthy individual, reticulocytes should count for about half to 1.5% of all red blood cells that we find in a normal blood sample. If we find low reticulocyte count, that's an indication of a problem. For example, we know that from kidney cells, we receive a hormone named erythropoietin, which erythropoietin speeds up erythropoiesis. If there is a kidney disorder and erythropoietin level is low, that would be one explanation why we end up with low reticulocyte count. Or sometimes we have enough erythropoietin secretion from kidneys, but red bone marrow is not capable of responding to erythropoietin. Please keep in mind, when we talk about production of cells, nutritional deficiencies could be another reason. To form red blood cells, aside from the presence of, for example, erythropoietin, I'm sure we know that we need proteins to form the globin chains of hemoglobin. We need iron ion to place it at the center of the heme group. Also, we need, for example, vitamin B12, which is one of our water-soluble vitamins. So deficiency of any of these important nutrients can easily lead to not having enough reticulocyte and therefore not having enough red blood cell in bloodstream. And that would be anemia. We have different types of anemia due to lack of different types of nutrition. If we have high reticulocyte count, that's an indication that red bone marrow is responding really well and producing enough cells to replace what has been lost. For example, if we have a patient that recently has gone through some hemorrhaging, some blood loss, and now when we analyze the reticulocyte count, we see that the numbers are really high, it simply means that red bone marrow is doing a great job to replace what has been lost. Or in those patients that they have to go through iron therapy, having high reticulocyte count is an indication that they're responding well to the treatment plan. So this is a short summary of a few important cells that we encounter throughout the process of erythropoiesis. Please note that the erythropoiesis process is divided into different steps, different phases. In this video, I just provided you an overview of the entire process. I hope you find this helpful.